At the very end of Jeff Gorton's introductory press conference with the Montreal media, he mentioned that Dominique Ducharme, the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens, would stay on as head coach until the end of the season. Jess, how do you feel about the fact that the Canadiens are going to stick around with Dominique Ducharme as their head coach until the end of the year?
Well, I see the reason why he said that, because if he was at that press conference and he was very vague about the coach's future, I think that would have caused, even more pressure put onto the season, a lot more talk away from the ice. And this team really doesn't need it so far this year. Now, I don't necessarily think that Dominique Ducharme will be the head coach past this year. A new GM is going to come in. They're going to want to bring their own people. And besides making it to the Stanley Cup final last year, Dominique Ducharme this season hasn't really proven that he is the guy who's able to coach this team. There has been a lot of questionable decision-making, especially at this point where, they're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but the reality is they're not going to make the playoffs. So like we've spoken about before on this show, why not use this as an opportunity to give young players more experience, because you have nothing to lose at this point. And he still is kind of hesitant to use Cole Caulfield in certain positions, that he's not helping his development there, which you're kind of wondering, why is he doing that? That this would, I think, help him if he wants to remain the coach of this team, to give these younger people, put them in those kind of situations, and then live with whatever mistakes they make, because it's not going to be worse than what's happening right now. But I wasn't surprised that Jeff Gorton said that Dominique Ducharme's job is safe until, the end of the season.
I think even if Jeff Gorton wanted to change coaches, Jeff Molson wouldn't let him. Jeff Molson's still paying Claude Julien $5 million this year not to coach. He just signed Ducharme to a 3-year, $5.1 million contract a few months ago. So he's already spending, if my math is correct, he's already spending $6.7 million on coaches this season. He's not going to pay another one. And as I've written, if they wanted to make a coaching change, an easy solution would be to make Luke Richardson the interim head coach until the end of the season. But Jeff Molson can't do that either, because now you're going to have another language controversy about a unilingual Anglophone being head coach, and everything's going to blow up. So I don't think, even if Jeff Gorton wanted to make a coaching change at this point, I don't think Jeff Molson would let him. I also think part of the breakdown with Marc Bergevin's contract negotiations, I believe Jeff Molson might have wanted to pay him a little bit less than maybe Bergevin thought he was worth, because he was still paying Claude Julien $5 million this season, because he's still paying Carl Alsner. Some of Bergevin's mistakes cost Jeff Molson a lot of money. And don't forget, there was no fans in the stands last season either because of COVID. So I believe that during negotiations with Bergevin, Molson probably wanted Bergevin to take maybe a little bit of a pay cut, because you cost me a lot of money along the way, and Bergevin wasn't willing to do that. And that's sort of how we came to the situation where Bergevin went into this season as a lame duck GM. So again, I don't believe Jeff Gorton really had an option when it came to changing the coach this season. We're going to go with Dominique Ducharme to the end of the season. And at this point, I'd be very surprised if Dominique Ducharme is back next season.
I'm not surprised that he gave him the vote of confidence to finish the year. I mean, he seems like a pretty fair, decent type of guy. He's just coming in here as a new guy, trying to get a feel of so many areas and personnel. And he's giving Dominique Ducharme a fair look to see what he can do till the end of the year. He's also going to look, obviously, at his whole coaching staff to see where they're at and what's happening and, what's missing. So a little bit of patience there. He's the kind of guy that wants to get like I said, a real good feel of, direction that they're going in the dressing room. And, one thing for sure, it won't take him long if he sees that so many areas of the Montreal Canadiens are struggling, whether it's power play, penalty killing, goals against, the whole game, what's going on. He's going to get a real good understanding with time, and then he'll address the issue once the GM gets in place. So it'll be something that will be decided upon once a couple other pieces fall into place.
I like Dominique Ducharme, but I mean, his regular season record speaks for itself. It's terrible. They got on that roll in the playoffs, and I mentioned Luke Richardson. 3 of the big wins in the playoffs against Vegas were with Luke Richardson as head coach after Dominique Ducharme tested positive for COVID. And his system, I mean, they just seem to be so confused and they can't figure it out. And the one thing with Gorton, excuse me, if I was him, what I'd be doing now is basically just telling Dominique Ducharme, wins and losses, we're not going to judge you on wins and losses the rest of the season. We want you to play the kids. We need to find out what we have here. We don't really care if we win or lose right now. We want to develop these kids and see what we have. And moving forward, that's what we want you to do, is work on development rather than working on wins and losses. Because I think right now, when you look at the ice time and the way he's not using the kids, I think Dominique Ducharme is still coaching to try and win games and save his job. And at this point, losses are going to help the Canadiens more than wins moving forward when it comes to the draft. So to me, that would be the strategy moving forward if I was making the decision with Dominique Ducharme as head coach.
But injuries obviously are a huge part this year. They don't have their regular lineup. But one thing, or one area that I always felt is really, really important, no matter who you have in the lineup, and that is the desire to compete and the willingness to get involved. And when you see a team, I don't care who's on the team, taking shortcuts and not showing up each and every shift, I have a problem with that. And ultimately that comes down to the coach or coaches not getting, the most you can get out of what you have. And that's what their job is supposed to be. And if that's not happening, I always remember the biggest problem that you have as a coach is if the guy upstairs thinks that those players that you're working with should be a lot better than what they are, then you got yourself in trouble. But one thing remains constant. You have to get these guys to compete each and every night, each and every shift. And if they don't, that's unacceptable. And that goes on to the coaching staff.
Jess, you want last word on this?
I just don't think that he's the coach that's going to be able to motivate these players. And last season when he took over, it was a unique year. They didn't have a lot of practice time. It was all about his system not having enough time to be implemented. And now, he's had enough time for it. And the team's just not playing well, especially defensively. They just don't really look all that organized. So to me, I just can't see him continuing to be the head coach after the season.
I'll just say this. All the reasons you guys mentioned with Dominique Ducharme not being good in the regular season and the team looking as discombobulated as they are, I think that's exactly why Jeff Gorton is keeping Dominique Ducharme as head coach until the end of the year, because the Canadiens are not looking as if they're going to get any better. And if they continue to look as bad as they've been, that puts them firmly in the conversation for the NHL draft lottery at the end of the season when they try to get themselves another top pick from the draft. You don't want a situation, if you're a team that's as bad as you're looking right now, a team that might need to look to make changes going forward, that all of a sudden you just go on this crazy run that puts you in playoff contention and weakens your odds at getting yourself a top pick. So I think keeping Dominique Ducharme for this year, if you're trying to, start this rebuild that you're thinking about doing, that's probably the right call. Beyond that, I have a lot of questions about Dominique Ducharme coming back as head coach for the Montreal Canadiens. And I'm not particularly convinced, just like everyone else here, that he will be the coach for next year. That being said, Stu does bring up a really good point with the whole money thing, because the money's not necessarily free flowing, if you get what I mean here. And that's a lot of money being assessed to all those coaches on Jeff Molson's payroll. And if he has to put in for another one, it's a lot of money being doled out here. Stu, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
I was just saying there was a lot of empty seats at the Bell Center the other night for that game against Tampa. So there's, from a business, it's a business, right? Sports is still a business at the end of the day. And Jeff Molson is not, the money's wasn't rolling in last season. And there's a lot of empty seats this season.
Very true. Let us know in the comments section. What do you think about Dominique Ducharme staying on as head coach? And write us some ideas as to who could be the head coach next year. You can even write Patrick Waugh if you want to. Subscribe to the YouTube page for more clips and more episodes. Visit hockeyinsideout.com for other fun stuff as well. And subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. You can go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to check that out.